Welcome to another episode of the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail, and it is our Dublin Racing Festival review coming to you here on Tuesday. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as always by Matt Tombs and Donn McClean. And Don, look, I always do try, because with horse racing, there's always negatives, there's always stuff to give out about. I felt there was very little wrong about this weekend. I really enjoyed it. Watched it on TV on the Saturday, was there on the Sunday. You were there both days. Sum it up for those listeners or viewers that might not have had that opportunity.
Yeah, it's hard to sum it up quickly, Dan. But no, fantastic weekend. You know, the highlight for me, as I said, on Racing TV was the reception that Gallopin Des Champs got when he came back in. Like, you know, to have Ole Ole being sung from the stands at Leopardstown, that's unusual. And then they started to clap him from the time that he got to the parade ring, the top of the parade ring. And as you know, it's a fair old walk from the top of the parade ring where they come back in all the way around down the side of the parade ring into the winners' enclosure, the way they have it designed now. And they clapped him the whole way from there all the way in. And then Paul Townend went, you know, got it. And then they all just reached a crescendo then. But it's brilliant. He's brilliant for racing, Gallopin Des Champs. It's brilliant that he went and won again. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of the race and how it was run later on. But that was brilliant. But no, like there was so much going on over the week. And even Vishio winning the Paddy and Maureen Mullins handicap hurdle, trained by Emmett Mullins, ridden by Danny Mullins. No Mullins had ever won that race in the 8-year history of it since the Dublin Racing Festival started. And you could see how much it meant to the two lads, cousins, their granddad and grandmother. The race named after them, for them to win. And the ride Danny Mullins gave Vishio as well. Like, he had his feet out of the irons before the start just to make sure that she was going to go forward. So it was a well thought out plan, but that was part of it, away from the grade one races. But now there was so much going on. It was brilliant.
Yeah, and that mare bought specifically to win the race, like you said, Don, and to be able to I love when a plan comes together. And that was the theme of the week. A lot of trainers, Gavin Cromwell, just plans coming together, absolutely delivering it to the big day. And it's great to see a lot of trainers targeting this festival properly, because Matt, it's Leopardstown's my local track. It's always had good racing. It's always had pretty much these races we're always there. But to have them on the one weekend, it just transcends it beyond our small circle in Irish racing to the UK racing, to people over the water. But then also, as a result, people outside the racing bubble latch on to a lot of the traction on social media about Gallopin Des Champs and his sensational win. I just thought it was just a brilliant festival. Also, while I was there, Matt, met a lot of Cheltenham Trail listeners, and a lot of people enjoy listening to the show, have their own opinions, and like them challenged by you guys, and then come up with their own one by the end of it, you know. So it was just a great weekend, and I met a lot of Cheltenham Trail listeners.
Oh, that's great to hear. I think it's been a triumph, DRF. As you say, putting the two cards together has just taken it to a greater number of people, particularly the number of people who come over from Britain for the weekend to watch now, and who talk about it being the best weekend of the year. Some people prefer it to Cheltenham. So fantastic. And on Gallopin Des Champs, I think racing people have known for a while that he's a genuinely great horse. But often, when horses are getting into their sort of third, fourth season over the obstacles, it's a bit like Hurricane Fly. People knew he was a great horse when he was winning champion hurdles, but then the real sort of affection just goes up to that next level. And you were talking about the Ole, the fact you couldn't get to the paddock to see him come in afterwards. That's brilliant for the game. And the way he's been campaigned is wonderful for the game. 5 grade ones a season. It's easy to underestimate just how important that is for keeping racing fans' interest in racing at a time when, for a lot of people, it's dwindling, and there are a lot of other sports out there you can bet on now. So absolutely wonderful. I love watching him.
Well, it's as simple as, if he does, hopefully, as he's odds on to do, wins a third Gold Cup, it's not the season not over. We can all go to Punchestown, and he'll probably go off second favourite. Maybe, I don't know who's going to be favoured against him, but you know what I mean? It just gives us something extra to talk about and show he is maybe not as good a horse there, but could he still maybe win a Punchestown Gold Cup, for example, and makes that festival even bigger. So a lot to get through. It will be dominated by the Dublin Racing Festival review here, using Cheltenham trends, or how these races ultimately work out leading up to the Cheltenham Festival. Then we'll do 3 eye catchers each from the guys as well. And just to point you in the direction of insights.matchbook.com if you want a full recap of all our betting podcasts coming later in the week, and head over to the Matchbook betting exchange. Invariably, we will be best price on the odds checker grid on all horse racing in the UK and Ireland. So if you don't have a Matchbook account, well worth setting it out, and check out the website on details in how to sign up. But we will start with Nathaniel Lacey. Matt, hit us with the trend and your thoughts on the race, because I was with you for most of the day in terms of taking on the favourite, but watching RTE leading up to the race, it was just so hard not to be with Final Demand because of that money that was coming. It just felt that the more we learned about the market and the more we learned about the race, that there just maybe wasn't another good horse in this race, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the vibes were very strong, weren't they? And they were absolutely right. The trend is that winners have finished 5, 2, 2, 2, 3 in the Albert Bartlett. Losers, though, 2 from 15, 227% profit. And runners are 0 from 5 in the Turners, including 2 winners. And that might be more relevant, as we'll come on to in a minute. It's the 8th running of this as a 2-mile-6 race, the best performance I've seen in it, won by 12 lengths. The previous biggest winning margin was 5 lengths. And not only that, he was coming here just off a point in a maiden hurdle win. The first winner off one hurdles run. He'd been lugging right at Limerick. He was positioned up the inner here, and he was pretty straight at his obstacles, jumping okay without being that fluent. But what was so impressive was the way he strode clear at the business end. Yeah, he looks a top-class novice. Now, the sectionals suggest they went an unusually strong pace here, especially in the second half of the race. His rivals fell in a hole at the business end while he kept up the gallop. And you get very few staying novice hurdles before Cheltenham. Admittedly, this is 2.6, not the full 3 miles, where they do go a good gallop. Now, to me, this screamed Albert Bartlett. We've got a half-brother, Antrim Coast, another time to tinker, both 3 milers. Does have a bit of a knee action. He's out of a Fleming's Firth mare, Zuzko, likes soft ground and was third in the Royal Bond on it. So if you've got a sound surface, that'd be a bit of a question mark. Now, when trying to work out whether he goes for the Turners or Albert Bartlett, it's vital to remember one of the key rules of Mullins Bingo, the 18 rule. Willie starts with a strong presumption that he'll split his best 3 novice hurdling geldings between the Supreme Turners and Albert Bartlett. The moment he doesn't have another Albert Bartlett horse, everything else is 34.0 or bigger. But Caroline Tisdall, who owns JetBlue, is also involved in this horse. And JetBlue won the Best British Trial, the Bristol, in December. So that might impact this. And Willie suggested after DRF, Kopek de Board, we'll come on to later, is 18 in the Supreme. Final Demand is 18 in the Turners. Salvatore Mundi, one of the B team, is in the Supreme. So knowing Willie, that might just have been a reaction to what Final Demand and Kopek de Board did at Leopardstown. I wonder whether when he starts thinking about his team for the Albert Bartlett, he might change. There could be some real anti-post value if we get the classic Mullins late switch. Many punters thought Ballyburn and Sir Gerhard were definites to go for the Supreme after their DRF wins. They ended up in the Turners because Willie wanted to have an A-teamer in all 3. So such a switch would be more likely if something like Funicular or Kiss Will throw their hats into the ring with a wow performance in something like the listed 2-mile novice at Punchestown next week. It's a watching brief on that, but I was very impressed with Final Demand. Assuming Willie does stick to plan A and run him in the Turners, he may be the fundamentalist or Fahim type that've been running over staying trips, but does in fact possess that real turn of foot you need in the Turners. Willie said he'd had no problem making the running, so perhaps he will go a much stronger pace and make it a different challenge. What he did here was gallop. So I think Mullins Bingo is going to be particularly interesting in the novice hurdling division this year, but I was really taken with the winner here.
Okay, a lot in that, Don. Let's move on to say Final Demand and perhaps looking at the Albert Bartlett. Are we seeing that race in recent years become a bit more of a classier race than it has been in previous years, and therefore a horse like Final Demand can run in the Albert Bartlett and is maybe not too, quote unquote, too good for a race like that, if you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think it's a stairs race, Dan, the Albert Bartlett. I mean, that's a bit of common sense there. A 3-mile novice hurdle. But yeah, like it can turn into, as I saw last year, it looked like the jukebox man was home, but Gordon just got the better of him in the running. It's a race that you really have to see it out. And yeah, as Matt was saying, like the sections of this race, like Final Demand, he was over 2 seconds faster than the next fastest horse, Jasmine DeVoe, through the final furlong of the race. So it wasn't that he was wilting at the end of 2 miles 6 furlongs at the end of a well-run race. So he's a serious talent. There's been a lot of talk about him even before he won his maiden hurdle at Limerick, and that talk has all been justified. The way that he went through his race here, just behind the pace, and that wingman ran well. Mozzie's sister ran very well to keep on and finish third. They were up handy. But Final Demand, the market beforehand, and he travelled through his race like the most likely winner from a fairway out, and went and found as much as it looked like he was going to find. So it was a massive performance for me, but it is really interesting to see what Willie's going to do. I mean, Matt's knows this the Willie Mullins bingo way better than I do, but it is fascinating to see how he's going to split them up. I'll come on to the Tadas Ireland Novices Hurdle later on, because it's a similar story there. Like, what has he done with horses who've won that in the past? And with this race, Dancing City went to the Albert Bartlett. Last year's winner, Manala Kakuna, went to the Albert Bartlett. Garrett de Manil, he went to the Turners in 2021. That was the year in which Statler, who finished third in the Nathaniel Lacey race, he went and ran in the Albert Bartlett instead. So we split them up. And yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. But we know with Willie Mullins, and especially with his novice hurdlers, there's nothing set in stone until it's set in stone. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. We'll come on to it later on. I thought Jasmine DeVoe ran a big race, and we'll come on to it later on in eye catchers. But no, the winner was very, very, very good. It's going to be fascinating to see where he goes now.
Okay, yeah.
Daniel, just before we move on from that, you mentioned about the Albert Bartlett. Is it becoming a better race? I think there's a bit of a misconception about that. Bobsworth won the Gold Cup. Native River was in that. Manila Indo was in that, winning the Gold Cup. Actually, in terms of the number of winners that any race at the festival produces at the next festival, none have produced more than the Albert Bartlett. It's a much better race than it's given credit for.
Yeah, I guess maybe just the starting prices, because it's such bigger, it has that perception, like you said, Matt. But yeah, those horses go on. Therefore, just because the market might be wrong on the day, doesn't mean those horses aren't the classier type. So who knows and find them out. I was fairly sure he's going to Turners after listening to Willie Mullins, but there is a lot to think about based on what the lad said. And a reminder, this show is trending towards the Cheltenham Festival, notwithstanding we know how incredibly big a festival DRF, but we are looking towards where these horses will go next. And obviously Spring Juvenile Hurdle is next. Before we get the trend off, Matt, Don, I want you to cover the race, and maybe just a general question. Actually, I was only thinking there this morning about this race. When you have the Irish horses and the British horses in a race like the juveniles, how do you go about comparing the two to come up with the correct answer in your head at what form you're going to back? Because on paper it looks like the British have the best two by far, and Hello Neighbour is the best of the Irish. But how good is Hello Neighbour? Can he challenge these top two, and how do you go about trying to find that out?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Dan. It's difficult, and I suppose the fact that this race, and Matt will cover this in more detail, has been such an accurate pointer to the time. It's not just the winners, it's the losers as well, and all the way back to Countrywide Flame. But the British juveniles look good, and look, Lulamba was very good, and he was all the top beforehand, and he went and did, but everybody expected him to do an Ascot and did it really impressively. In the East India Dock is very good as well. Lamba into second place at Ascot. Mondaman has a rating of 111 on the flat, so a very highly rated horse, but he was just too keen through the early part of the Ascot race, and maybe Lulamba was flattered a wee bit in beating him as easily as he did, and that he had such a high rating on the flat going into the race. Hello Neighbour is rated 97 on the flat. That's after just 2 runs, so he had the potential, or still has the potential, to be better than that on the flat. Like, to get such a high rating for a horse going juvenile hurdling after 2 runs on the flat, including one of them over an inadequate trip, that's a really high rating to bring into the race. And look, he did lots of things wrong when he won the Grade 2 race at Lebanon over Christmas. The fact, as we discussed before, Dan, the fact that Gavin Cromwell decided to run him in the Grade 2 race and not in the maiden hurdle, that to me was an early indication of the regard in which he was held. Like, we kind of knew that from before, from his flat runs anyway. And like, Gavin has always been quite positive, very positive about Hello Neighbour. He did things better on Saturday. But he was still keen through the early part of the race. It was a slowly run race. The finishing speed percentage was 107%, and he was the keenest horse through the race. And he also travelled best into the home straight. He was the only horse who was still on the bridle on the run to the final flight. And Keith Donagh, who just angled him out, got his gap, jumped the final flight well. And I suppose if you're to be critical from that point, you would have loved to have seen him going away and putting 3 or 4 lengths between himself and his rivals. He didn't do that, but I think he's a horse who, he seems to just do as much as he needs to do. Galileo Dame came out of the pack and came after him, and you could argue she was a bit unlucky not to be closer than she was, but he was holding her going to the line. And I think there's much more to come from this horse. He wore a hood for the first time on Saturday. That helped him settle a bit better. He's definitely going to get a fast pace in the Triumph Hurdle as long as East India Dock runs, so that's going to help him. And he's got that class and that ability to travel, the ability to quicken. He's only had 4 runs in his life. Over hurdles. He's getting better at his hurdle. His jumping was better on Saturday than it was at Christmas, and you'd expect it will be better again in the Triumph Hurdle, and it could be better again for a faster pace. So like he finished further in front of Lady Vega Allen than he did at Christmas, using her as a guide, or even the way the race was run. He improved on Christmas. There's every chance he'll improve again. And yeah, like, you know, the general consensus is that the British horses are better. That the 2 top juveniles are better than the Irish juvenile hurdlers, and you know there wasn't that much of a gap between the first 3 home in Saturday's race. But I think Hello Neighbour is very, very good, and yeah, he's a player in the hurdle picture for me.
Okay, yeah, man, hit us with your trend, and then the question: is it a genuine 3-horse race for this Triumph Hurdle, or at least 3 at the top of the market, or all have a serious chance of winning in your view?
Oh, they definitely do. Yeah, but as Don's touched on, it's not just the winners of this that do well. The trend is, since the spring became a Grade 1 in 2010, winners are 3 from 15 in the Triumph. You'd have a 30% loss backing them. The losers are 6 from 34, 106% profit. So I think it's more than a 3-horse race. I agree with what Don said about Hello Neighbour. I think he's the type who might be a bit underestimated. Have 4 runs. He's won by no more than 3 lengths in any of them, but he keeps winning. He's got a good attitude. So he doesn't radiate that star quality that tends to shorten horses up, but he keeps winning. But I think Galileo Dame's definitely a contender as well. She was going on at the finish, beaten by about 3/4 of a length. She was more exposed on the flat than the winner, £1 lower and 96 after 8 runs, but she does get the £7 fillies allowance. But she'd only run in a maiden, not a Grade 2 over hurdles. She comprehensively turned the form around with Wendrock, finishing 13 lengths in front of him here, albeit he faded badly on the run-in after getting the last wrong. So she looks like she's improving as well. On breeding, she looks to have speed, but she looked to stay well here. She's a maiden over hurdles, but Farclar won the Triumph after finishing second on both his previous starts over timber, so I wouldn't let that put you off. I think the Triumph looks a really good race this year. And the eye-catcher worth mentioning here was Willie de Huel, who until now I've been secretly pleased hadn't lived up to the hype, given his name's hard to pronounce. He was too keen again here, but ran much better, closed the gap with Hello Neighbour from 11.5 lengths at Christmas to 4.5. He's had 5 runs. He jumps pretty well. Will he go for the Fred Winter? He's 138 now in Ireland. 139 is the highest mark the Fred Winter has been won off, so maybe he'll be too high. Willie's 0 from 23 in the race because he doesn't plot his juveniles up as some of his rivals do. But if he is about to fulfil the high regard they had for him back in the autumn, perhaps he's the type who could buck that trend.
Okay, maybe look down the field for this race with a view to the Triumph Hurdle, outrunning their odds at the very least. Let's move on to the Irish Arkle. Matt, hit us with your trend and your thoughts on the race, and I'll just give you a quick context of how the RT commentating this week, and just so you know what they do in RT, for the Grade 1s, they get one of the co-coms, so be it Barry Geraghty, be it Ruby Walsh or whoever's on with Richard Pugh, and it works so well. But the co-coms were saying Matchbook's gone off too quick. Mark Walsh won't be happy halfway through the race. The tone started changing by the end of it. I mean, it was hard not to be impressed. How impressed were you with Matchbook? Just given that there would have been a few doubts early on in the race, has he gone off too quick, for example?
I was very impressed. Yeah, they went a proper gallop here. Time was 1.5 seconds under standard. Matchbook was a bit novice at some of his obstacles. He nodded at the 5th and the 8th and put down at the 6th. It didn't seem to knock him out of a rhythm. Now, I'm very much at the learning stage of understanding the race IQ data. It's likely some of their metrics will prove much more useful than others. I've long been a big believer in momentum jumping obstacles. How you get away from an obstacle is often more important than how fluent you are at it. Now, Race IQ gave him a jump index of 9.6 out of 10. If you're judging that and how fluently he jumped the obstacles, you'd think they've been watching another race. But they have an average speed recovery metric, which they described him as recording a lightning reading of 0.58 seconds. And just using my eyes, he gets away from his fences with real momentum, even when he doesn't jump them that well. So the traditional reaction to watching this would be, firstly, say, Matchbook's really talented, a worthy opponent for Sergino, still straining the reins a bit, but Mark eased him down near the line, took a while to pull up. But that traditional reaction would also be, he'd have to jump better against a horse of Sergino's class, given how he jumped at Kempton. For all the Cheltenham fences are softer than those at Leopardstown. But in fact, the speed with which he gets away from his fences may mean that Matchbook can get away with the odd novice jump. It looks an absolutely cracking matchup in the Arkle. I'm looking forward to that. And of the others, Touch Me Not have been a bold front runner who jumped really well in the Craddockstown, had a mid-race blunder in the Henry VIII, jumped well again here, but he just wasn't able to go Mashborough's gallop. And that helps put the form in perspective. Low de Sub was half driven to beat him 3 3/4 lengths. Mashborough's beaten him 9 lengths on the bridle. So he was rated 147 coming into this. He's now been bumped up to 151. His run style would be perfect for an old course Grand Annual, but whether he's handicapped to win it, I'm not sure. So I imagine he'll take his chance in the Arkle. Firefox is down £2 now to 149. Gordon's been saying it's still the Arkle. I wonder if he'll consider the Grand Annual. They're good novices, but if the two big guns get to the Arkle, it looks a match up to savour. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, Don, like for you, Mashborough, I mean, interesting thoughts on the jumping there, because that's the only thing that's created a debate. Some people not keen on this jumping, some had no issue with it. I guess the data there that Matt's alluded to there probably backs the fact that he just gets through his fences. Like, it doesn't have to be spectacular if the horse, it doesn't matter to the horse if he clips the fence or anything like that, or it looks like he stumbled at all, if he's back of the fence just as quick as if he just jumped it perfectly.
Yeah, like so a couple of things on that, Dan. He never looked like falling. Like, I was watching the race live, you never thought he was going to come down. And Mark Walsh said afterwards that he just seemed concentration on some of his obstacles, and that to me is significant. Like the two down the back straight in a row where he got in a wee bit tight, then he came down to the next one, he jumped that well, he just went in and popped it. Then he got the next one a bit wrong, but then down to the fourth last, down to the third last, Mark Walsh saw a stride, asked him up, and he flew it. And that third last fence at Leopardstown, the side camera on that is brilliant, because you can just see exactly what stride they're going to meet it on, about 4 strides out, and he zinged that fence. As Matt said, Touch Me Not, he's a confirmed front runner. He's a Craddockstown Chase winner. He's a high class horse, and he could only lead Mashborough for about a fence. And William Owen said afterwards that plan B, plan A to get a lead, but obviously it was just going so well. Mark Walsh said, look, stride away and let's see what you can do. And I know he was so good. He does jump a bit to his left, and he did it at Fairy House. He did it again at Leopardstown, and it's obviously not an advantage at Fairy House, which is right-handed. It's not an advantage at Leopardstown either when they're going around the outside. The ground all week, as it was at Christmas, is around the outside. At Cheltenham, it's definitely not a negative, and it's probably a positive, because you're turning to your left all the time at Cheltenham, especially if the ground is goodish or good to soft. You're going around the inside, and it's only when, especially in the chase track, it's very rare they go around the outside. So I'd say that's probably a positive for him. It's only his run. He was over 2 seconds faster than Pian Jarrag was in the good handicap later on. So it was a massive performance. He was fastest of this field through each of the last 3 furlongs as well, and that was after setting the pace himself. So there was so much to like about this. Look, we just don't know. It's the two best juvenile hurdlers in Britain and Ireland respectively last season. They never got to meet. Sergino missed Cheltenham, obviously, with the Nicky Henderson horses, and then Mashborough wasn't at Aintree whenever Sergino went and won there. They both beat Carghese. Okay, you can argue Sergino beat her by a wee bit further than Mashborough did, but it's a fairly tenuous link or line of form. Sergino's won the Fighting Fifth Hurdle and a Wayward Lad Chase this season. Mashborough's won a good beginner's chase, and now he's won an Irish Arkle. There's £2 between them on official ratings, 164 versus 162 in favour of Sergino. But yeah, like Mashborough, he's just there's so much to like about him. When he came into the yard first, William thought he was a Gold Cup horse, and he's won a Triumph Hurdle in the meantime. So there's just so much to like about him, and yeah, it's going to be a fascinating clash between the two of them.
We're getting a great clash, and look, the Turner's Novices Chase, as it was called last year, is not there anymore. We are certain both these horses, if they touch wood, get to the festival safety, will run in the Arkle, and that can only be good for racing. Don, it started a great 40 minutes. We mentioned the oohs and ahs from the crowd just as they jumped Mashborough, but Galloping the Champ, it was great to be there, I'm sure, for you to watch in the stands. Sum up with a view to the Cheltenham Gold Cup. I mean, can any horse get near him here, or is it maybe just Banbridge if he even runs, if the ground's good enough?
Yeah, that's my hope anyway. No, look, we've covered a lot of it all the way along, but it was just brilliant, all the reception that he got. But even through the race, like Paul Town, he's so good. He was so good on him. The finishing speed percent is 111%. So he managed to win as impressively as he did, while making him as easy as he could. And the fact that it wasn't a fast pace, if Fact the File was going to beat him, he had his chance. They rode him in behind, as most people thought they would. and he had every chance. He moved through his race well. Mark Walsh gave him the perfect ride, arrived there, and actually watching the race again this morning, you could argue the fact that I was actually travelling better than Galopin Des Champs on the run around the home turn. That's if you didn't know the horse and you didn't know how unstoppable Galopin Des Champs is on Leopardstown's running. But he did travel well. He travelled up, and then he just couldn't live with him. Galopin Des Champs just came away again from his rivals, and look, he's for his third Gold Cup in the Cheltenham Gold Cup. He's a triple Irish Gold Cup winner now. To try and go and join the likes of Best Mate, Oracle, Cottage Break, and Golden. I think they're the only 4 triple Cheltenham Gold Cup winners. He's already up there with Florida Pearl and Jadam. He's another triple Irish Gold Cup winner, and he's still only 9. He's for a horse who's achieved all that he's achieved. He's still got plenty left to give you hope. And yeah, like to put this quality of field away like he did, it was massive. And like there are other horses in behind. Grange-Clare West ran well, and I think he stayed on well. Monty Star, was a bit disappointed with Monty Star. I thought he might run a wee bit better than he did. He kind of faded and lost out on 4th place to another way of thinking in the end. So he's a horse he's going to have to bounce back. I still think there's more to come from Monty Star. He's still relatively lightly raced, but he's going to bounce back from this. But no, it was all about the winner.
All about the winner, Matt. And we've read stuff during the week, and a lot of it was brought up on social media that this horse isn't a superstar or doesn't get as much love as he should. I mean, I personally made it my business to get a day off work on the Friday Gold Cup last year to make it to Cheltenham to watch Galopin win his 2nd Gold Cup. I think in Ireland he's always been appreciated, and to think now finally maybe he's getting the recognition across the water.
Yeah, you'll always get some knockers of every horse, no matter how good they are. So I tend to block that out as white noise. I do think he's appreciated this side of the water. Of course, he is an Irish horse, so he might be even more appreciated there. But just as Constitution Hill is very much appreciated in Ireland, the Brits love Galopin Des Champs generally. So I think he is a genuinely great horse, and he proved that last season. I think he is at his best, though, at Leopardstown. They went very steadily again here. Time's 13.3 seconds slower than standard on a day, as I mentioned with Matchbook, was under standard. So he can show top-class form in a variety of circumstances, but these steadily run 3-mile grade 1s at Leopardstown, where he uses his class to kick away from a field of stairs at the business end, seem to show him to best effect. He's the one to beat clearly in the Gold Cup. He sets a very high standard. And with my racing fans hat, I really hope he wins, especially the way they've campaigned him, deserves that. But I don't think he's quite as bomb-proof as many do. 1.67, I wouldn't be steaming into him at that price. Just as Corto Star won 2 Gold Cups, but was at his best, Paul Nicholls used to call it, his home fixture at Kempton. I think Galopin's even better at Leopardstown. Now, just for the avoidance of doubt, that's not to say he doesn't show his true form at Cheltenham or anything silly like that. It's just that he's even better here. Last year, he was asked for pretty much everything to beat Jerry Colomb 3.5 lengths in the Gold Cup. He beat him 23 lengths in the Savills Chase. Here, you wouldn't take that literally, but it gives some hope for the others. And Factor File, you can look at it 2 ways with him. He settled better here, though I don't think he settled perfectly. But we said in the preview show on Thursday, we thought he would be ridden with the next day in mind to get him to settle rather than being the priority to try and win the Irish Gold Cup. You could interpret his run 2 ways. You could say, drop him to 2.5, the Ryanair, he'll settle better, his best form's at that trip. Or you could say that his best form is also in the John Durkan and the 2-mile 5 novice here last year, when he's gone a much stronger gallop. Maybe if they go a good gallop in the Gold Cup, he'll really settle and then just improve. So I hope they stick their guns and go the Gold Cup route. Don's mentioned Grange-Clare West, who's a horse I've always liked, who came on. Be interesting to see whether they try and settle him a bit better and go for the Gold Cup, or go for an aggressive front-running ride in the Ryanair using his jumping. Monty Star, as Don said, it was a bit disappointing. We're both fans of his. I suppose you could make an excuse. Henry's horses are under the cloud. He's 2 from 64 this year on a losing run of 31, and a lot of his fell out the telly at the weekend. He was beaten only about 8 lengths here, albeit with a slowly run race like this, the superiority doesn't get shown. So I suspect he's one to keep an eye on the vibes for in the run up to Cheltenham. When Manella Indo won the Gold Cup, he was pretty ordinary in the Irish Gold Cup. And then the vibes were really strong in the last week or so. I suspect Emery hasn't pressed any buttons with him. And finally, I know the way you're thinking was the obvious eye catcher, travelling on strongly in the straight, 7.25 lengths fourth, without being asked for too much. He's up £1 to 160 in Ireland. It'd be interesting to see what he gets for the Grand National. He's not a great jumper of conventional fences. He's landed in a heap at the first here. But those brush through spruce fences in the National might really suit him, as they did other iffy jumpers like Tiger Roll and Vanillier, Iron Maximus. A horse that jumps through the obstacles rather than wasting energy jumping over them is ideally suited to that. And Iron Maximus last year won off 159 as a second season chaser. So if I know your way of thinking, get something similar to that, he could be a candidate for the National.
Yeah, they haven't committed him to the National yet, which is I find strange, because it's not going to impact his handicap mark at all if you're only half committing to the race. Maybe just keep his price up. Who knows? I can't really see anywhere else they're going there. Second question, Matt, before I go. Grange Clare from this race, Grange Clare West. I've been backing him without over the last couple of races. I didn't back him without in the Irish Gold Cup on Saturday. Did you back him without in the Irish Gold Cup?
Sadly not. And I was also looking. He was in some tend to follow teams. And he would have, had he won that at 66 to 1, I was doing okay, but that would have propelled me to the top of the leaderboard. So I was cheering him on, even though my heart really wanted Gallopin to win.
Yeah, it took me until I saw the result 15 minutes later to realize he actually got up for second. I was just only focused on the winner. It's amazing. I had to watch it back a couple of times to see he actually got second off. Fact to file, we'll cover the City Isles. I want to keep towards the end of the show. I want to keep the DRF team and move on to Sunday. Don, I watched this race back to Croke Park, and I was certain if he got in a battle with Ballyburn as they were turning in, he would stay on and beat him. I was genuinely shocked that Ballyburn managed to dig out. So were we watching two really good horses, and Ballyburn just a better horse at the end of the day and managed to win?
Yeah, I was with you on Croke Park, Dan. I think he's an underrated horse. I still think he's an underrated horse, and therefore Ballyburn might have achieved even more in beating him like he did than is generally accepted. But like you, they come down to the last. I thought Croke Park, he actually landed in front over the last, but Ballyburn to stretch away and beat him by 5 lengths really forward, and he was stepping up a bit from the Wayward Lad chase, which Sergino beat him to 2 miles 5.5 furlongs. It was always likely that was going to bring about improvement. He settled okay. Paul Tanner was at pains to get him settled in behind, and he settled well enough to be able to be delivered like that. But I suppose in watching the way I thought Park might have had his measure over the last, but actually watching it again, Paul Tanner hadn't really gone for Ballyburn until he landed over the last, and he's got all that class. He's the Bearing Bingham Hurdle winner from last season. He was one of the standout horses from last season. But Croke Park ran a big. I'm wondering about Croke. Like I always as a real stayer. Like he won his big. Like he was due to run on the Albert Bartlett Hurdle last year. In fact, when he came out, when he didn't travel, that's when they put the winner on the ticket to the Albert Bartlett Hurdle in the end as a replacement for Croke Park. When his beginner's chase this season, his first run over fences, that was over 3 miles, which is for a horse starting on his career over fences to run over 3 miles in that Fairy House race, and he saw it out well. But the Drinmore chase, Sam Ewing rode him really well in the Drinmore chase, he rode him in front and kind of stacked them up. That was a finishing speed percent of 113%, so it wasn't a fast run race, and he has to go on that. And he beat Better Days Ahead at Cheltenham over 3 miles. But I kind of from having Croke Park down as a dark stare and a real stamina horse, I think he's got pace as well. And maybe that 2 miles 5.5 furlong trip might have been ideal for him, and Ballyburn still beat him and beat him fairly comprehensively in the end. So it was a performance in the end. Few obviously, like Empire Pass, thought he was going to be beaten a distance, and he stayed on. Champ Conley travelled well for a long while and then just faded. So it developed into really a match between the top two, and Ballyburn, you can see why he's favoured for the advisory chase. He'll probably improve again for setting up to 3 miles. But Croke Park, I'll be very interested to see where they go at Croke Park as well.
Yeah, again, I had him down the same as a stayer. Matt, tell us what this race means for a horse that might go on to either the Arkle or the Brown Advisory, the Broadway, the 3 mile in Cheltenham.
So the trends are that runners are 2 from 8 in the Arkle, 50% profit, 6 from 42, small profit in the Broadway. When the Turners over 2.5 are still there, all 14 runners, including 6 winners, were beaten. So as I say almost every week, be open-minded about what distance the runners in these novice races are most effective at. As you guys have covered, Champ Kylie and Impere Pass never really going, the latter, and then Champ Kylie going out tamely. It ended up a match. I got a bit excited having backed Croke Park when he got to the front. As Don said, Ballyburn was going pretty well, and they'd gone relatively steadily, 107% finishing speed. Ballyburn was winning the 2-mile novice hurdle here last year. Croke Park was running 3-mile races. So it's not surprising that he had too much toe for him on the run-in. But Ballyburn's finishing effort was really impressive. He's bred to be a 3-miler, so maybe he'll improve again for the step up in trip in the Broadway. The big concern with him is his jumping. The Race IQ data had him losing 5.25 miles an hour on average each fence, the most of any of the runners here. 14 fences over an extended 2 miles 5. In the Broadway, there'd be another 5 fences and just 3 furlongs further, including 2 in the home straight. The second last a bit of a trappy fence close to the turn-in. So whether he can afford to be losing so much momentum up against a stronger field's open to question. He's also buzzy type, needs to prove he can settle to get the trip in the Broadway. For all on breeding, he should relish it. He showed last season he's very classy. Perhaps class will get him home, but 3.0 looks a bit skinny. Croke Park, I agree with Don. I mean, he has looked a real thorough stayer, but in the Drimmoor and here, he's shown a decent turn of foot as well. So probably means he's just a better horse than he's been given credit for. One of my regrets about the season has been that Jigginsdown didn't have a top 2.5 mile chaser, which would have allowed Michael O'Leary to spend the winter making a point of how his star novice would be bypassing Cheltenham for Aintree or Fairyhouse in protest at the abolition of the Turners. Joyously, Gordon's been out to bat on his behalf, saying Croke Park could be a 2.5 mile specialist. And so, that specialist couldn't go to Cheltenham. This is the same Croke Park that won the only 3-mile Grade 1 novice chase in Ireland, got ton for toe here. Just outstanding stuff. But Croke Park's that sort of horse who I think will be underestimated, assuming he does go to Cheltenham, with a stronger gallop. If he is the stayer and Ballyburn's jumping comes under pressure, still got to prove his stamina, he could be decent each way value in the Broadway.
Yeah, he could. Yeah, he's going to definitely be underestimated by the market for sure, as he has been probably throughout his whole novice chasing campaign anyway. So yeah, maybe Croke Park one to watch for that 3-miler, assuming he goes there and the race is run a bit differently then over 2 miles 5 at Leopardstown. Let's move on to 2-mile novice hurdle. Matt, we'll stick with you and hit us with your trend and your thoughts on Copa de Boer because wow, I mean, yeah, it was just a wow performance that would take your breath away. All the horses were beaten turning in. It was just a procession.
That's exactly what my notes say. It starts off with wow. It was the performance of the festival in terms of wow. Obviously not at the level of a Galopin de Champ, but you know what I mean. So the trend is that winners are 9 from 22 at the festival, 11.49% profit, 6 of the winners in the Supreme, 3 in the Turners. He won at Christmas despite jumping dreadfully, but with Paul taking over, different proposition here. For me, that there is 0 chance of him taking Final Demand on at Cheltenham. So before the Braver Inca, I'd have said the Turners was his race. Steady gallop, give him time to get organised at his obstacle. But he jumped well here. And he was on his toes in the preliminaries and a bit keen in the race. So keen horses are better suited by the tempo of the Supreme. But the flip side is if you are the type of horse that gets wound up beforehand, there's more hullabaloo before the tapes go up in the Supreme. Everyone's a bit on edge at that point. In the Turners, day 2, everyone's a bit more relaxed. You can spend a decent bit of time in the quiet of the middle of the track where they start the race there. So I've mentioned, don't be absolutely dogmatic that Kopek de Boer, Supreme, Final Demand, Turners. Still think there's a bit of water under the bridge to go there. But whichever race he turns up in, Kopek de Boer looks like he'll take all the beating. He's the best novice I've seen so far. And one that I did think was going to be of interest when I watched the race originally was Carniquet. Went off just 6.5 for the future champions against Romeo Coolio. He blundered away his chance at the second there. He had 2 hurdle starts in France and ridden out the back early here on his 5th hurdle start, as if getting him qualified for the county may have been the objective. Ended up a respectful 13 lengths second, well clear of the others. Last year, Absurd was 17.5 lengths 4th in this, won the county off 138. So I was thinking, right, he goes straight in the Festival Handicaps notebook. But he's been given an Irish mark of 144 And with the British handicapper typically giving the Irish hurdlers £3 to £5 more on average, perhaps he's just not going to be well enough handicapped to win that. But the winner, absolutely sensational.
Yeah, winner, absolutely sensational, Don.
Yeah. The chance that he'd do something like this, if he got his jumping together, like he Patrick Mullen said after the Christmas race, he must have some engine to do what he did and win like he did, given that all the hurdles that we saw, he was jumping to his left and going tight and kicking them. At his time, was very good at Christmas as well. It was a phenomenal performance. Like Matt, I was thinking that he'd be a Turner's hurdle horse. He's after the Utopia de Board, who was a 2.5 to 3 mile mare. But he showed all that pace. He was over 2 seconds faster than Stateman and McLaury, where they were similar times, and he was 2 seconds faster than the two of them. He was only just slower than the bumper. So it was a massive performance by him. He jumped a lot better than he did at Christmas time, and that allowed him improve like he did. And on the Cheltenham Targets, Classical Charm went to the Supreme Novices Hurdle. The Syria for Lunge did as well. Annie Le Téton appreciated. He went to the Supreme. He won. Sigurd and Balburn of Willie's both went to the Bearing Bing, and they both won it. So there's no set precedent there. It's obviously horse related, and I suppose depending on what else is at Close Sutton at the time. But Carnegie, yeah, like I agree with Matt on him. He won the Tremor race that Aaron won, and in the Romeo Cooley race at Dackerson over Christmas, he made a really bad mistake at the second flight. So he's interesting going forward. But he just was playing second fiddle. Good and clever. Great that Warren Griggs brought him over, and he kept on well. But he's still a maiden over hurdles. He finished third behind Chatta's Charm. Formby hurdle, actually, again, one that we didn't see a whole lot of. But good that he was over and he kept on. And he definitely has a future. But Copac de Board, yeah, he's a potential superstar now.
Yeah, wow factor for sure. And we'll move on to the Dublin Chase now, Matt. Before you hit your trend, just the thoughts maybe on how the race set up. So when Solness passed his first time out watching the race, he was on the outside fresh to the ground, and Danny Mullins had just decided to take up the running and basically go for home, for want of a better description, from there on. So there's so far to go. So I checked the odds expecting, maybe 3 to 1, that sort of thing. 2.75 on the exchanges, 7 to 4 in all money. And that was just as they were starting their second circuit, obviously only a short run-in for the first circuit. But my point is, the jockeys in behind, as was discussed in RT Racing after, did they allow that to happen too much, or was it a combination of that and their horses weren't able to go at the gallop? What was your thoughts on how the race set up? Because for anyone watching it, Solness did the exact same at Christmas, and the only way maybe to stop that happening is perhaps follow Danny Mullins, even if that maybe doesn't give your horse the best chance of winning. It's a tough one, I know.
It is, but you've highlighted the crucial point in analysing this race, and I do have a strong view on this. He was going at around 34 miles an hour for much of the first half of the race. Yeah, that is a proper eyes-out gallop. And if you look at the other horses, I just think most of them couldn't go the gallop with him. When Marine National came at him, Solness had every excuse to fold, but he found more. This was a serious performance. They did go too quick in the sense that it was a 95% finishing speed, but he just took so many of them out of their comfort zone. Gaelic Warrior possibly needs bad ground to be effective at this trip. Quillickshos and Captain's Guinness Yard are under a cloud. El Fabiolo tipped up. So it did fall apart a little bit, but I thought Solness was very good. The winner looks ground dependent, doesn't he? He hated the mud when 25 lengths fourth in the Tingle Creek. A few years ago, I'd have been all over him for the Champion Chase, the double figure prices that he is, because the sound surface was extremely likely, but it's not anymore. So I think you're on weather watch. If he gets his ground and Ile Francais also lines up, it ought to be a cracking spectacle. Been some chat over which of those two could go with the other. Said Solness was 34 miles an hour, even 35 at times, the first mile here. After the first in the King George, Ile Francais was never above 32 miles an hour, generally about 30 miles an hour for the first mile. So for me, the question is whether Ile Francais can go the Solness gallop, not the other way round. I'll let Don talk about Marine National because he's got him as an eye catcher. But this is the classic sort of horse who, because of starting in the autumn, having ordinary form to start with and really improving, a lot of people will say he can't be a Champion Chase horse. If he gets his ground, he's a real contender.
Yeah, Don, the answer was in front of our eyes at Christmas in terms of the best bet in this race, and I think it was telling that the very late money came. I think 9.0 was available throughout the day, and surprised me seeing maybe the 6-1 SP suggested this small bit of money came towards the end on this horse. But cracking ride from Danny Mullins. But this is a Grade 1, proper Grade 1 horse.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, he's had 17 runs over fences now, so nice and unexposed and going forward with lots of potential to improve again. It's quite incredible, really. What is it that's allowed him to improve? Is it, the riding style, racing style? But he's gone forward before. Remember, he won his hurdle race at Sligo under that was the Diamond's run when JJ7 was out injured, and he went from the front out of, I suppose it was a process of elimination, who was going to lead. But at Christmas time, you're kind of wondering, where did that performance come from? And you're kind of going, well, JJ7 rode him around the outside on the best of the ground. Here was Ross went around the inside, and they just allowed him to do his own thing in front. And I was kind of thinking that the fog had something to do with it, but there was no fog on Sunday, and he just did the same thing again. Interestingly, when Marine Nationale closed up on him at the top of the home, or on the run across the second last and onto the turn, he traded 1.19 in running. So the expectation was that he was going to go and get him. But Wiley Danny Mullins saved a little bit, and he went on again. And no, to me, I agree with you. It was a proper performance. And that running style, it's an asset at Cheltenham. We know that, especially in the 2 mile race. So we don't know how he's going to operate at Cheltenham. We know he's very good at Leopardstown, and if you're trying to find reasons why he might not repeat it, maybe it's a Leopardstown thing, or Leopardstown suits him really well, and Leopardstown does suit him. But there's no reason why Cheltenham won't suit him as well. On Marine Nationale, yeah, I was really encouraged by his run. I thought it was a step forward from his run last day, when he finished third behind Solness and Gaelic Warrior. And I thought, the fact that he allowed Gaelic Warrior get the better of him for second place the last day, having passed him, that to me was a horse who might come forward from that. And I thought he did. And if, Matt's made the point about the Cheltenham, it's not given that it's going to be good ground anymore. But the last 2 years have been soft ground. But I think the 5 years before that were good to soft or better. So just because, it's not a given that we're going to have soft ground either. And I think a better ground would suit Marine Nationale. It would also suit Solness. But also back at Cheltenham, like Marine Nationale's best performance was a Supreme Novice win. And he's still a lightly raced horse. Like, he's a year older than Solness, yet he's only run in 5 chases, and Solness has run in 17. So it just shows you the different degree to which they've been campaigned. And Marine Nationale, for me, yeah, like I think he can go forward again. Gaelic Warrior, obviously disappointing. Just in the back of my mind is the fact that he disappointed so badly last year as well at this meeting, and then was brilliant in the Arkle. So I just wouldn't be putting the line through him yet.
Yep. A lot to take out of that race. Marine Nationale, and Barry Connell saying he's the best of the Irish going in, or he said something along those lines. You can look up the quote for the champion chase. Bullish as ever from Barry, and to be honest, we love that. It's a game of opinions. I'd rather Racing World with Barry Connell than without, for sure. Irish champion hurdle, Don, not too much to take, I guess, only to say we're a bit surprised how the race lined up. The two, I don't think I've ever really seen that. If that, do you know what I mean? Like, just two of the top horses just deciding to let's just have a race between the two of us.
Yeah, like Willie said afterwards that there were no instructions, and he didn't know what the tactics were going out. So look, they both rode their horses to maximize the chances of winning, and that's how it was playing out. It's such a shame, isn't it, that we didn't get to see how it would play out. At least State Man didn't come down. That would have been if she'd taken him down with her. Thankfully, she was okay. And thankfully, Danny Mullins was okay as well, rode in the next. So that leaves the question, obviously, where is she going to go now? They're still saying champion hurdle, so great. State Man didn't have anything to do afterwards, just keeping going. Interesting, Paul said after that the final flight looked very big on such a good jumper coming up to it. But look, they went so fast early on. They recorded early first of 13.7 seconds, 14.12. His closing furlongs were 16.05 and 15.7. So obviously a lot slower, but that's a function of the quick pace that they went early on. And look, and he's won 11 now. He's won 3 Irish champion hurdles. He is the reigning champion hurdle title holder. So he's a top class horse. It's another Irish champion hurdle win on the board, albeit a little bit bloodless. But look, he'll go on to Cheltenham now. He's obviously going to have to do better than his last couple of runs if he's going to constitute well, but he goes in there with the chance. Hopefully, Ossimat will join him there, and hopefully brighter days ahead as well.
Yeah, man. Have you seen a race shape up quite like that? It just, the crowd and around me, we were just set up for an absolute classic. We were robbed of what could have been an absolute classic because you just couldn't call it so far out, obviously.
Yeah, it was hugely exciting at the time, wasn't it? And this has been quite a good numerical trial for both the Champion Hurdle, 9 from 73, but 2 from 5 in the Mayor's Hurdle, unsurprisingly as well. You've made a profit backing them. So let's hope they do, as you say, stick to their guns and Lossiemouth goes for the Champion. But the pace they went a good gallop in the Brave Inca, but Lossiemouth was 30 lengths ahead of Kopek de Bourbridge came down. Real eyes out stuff. Perhaps after not being able to go the gallop at the Christmas Hurdle at Kempton, Connections wanted to find out whether, with that experience under her belt, after a lot of steadily run contests before Kempton, she could go a proper Champion Hurdle gallop. The answer was yes. She could run that fast in the first part of the race. Unfortunately, she just never got properly off the ground at that hurdle. It was a relief to see her get up. I can't remember a horse winning a Champion Hurdle coming off a fall. The only horse to have fallen at all that season to win this century is Punjabi, who'd fallen a couple of starts forward at the Christmas Hurdle. So hopefully she'll be fine and line up. She will arrive there a bit of an unknown quantity as a 2-miler, which will make it very interesting. And given how fast they'd gone, Paul quite sensibly allowed Stateman to coast round after that. So he ended up in a slower time than Kopek de Board did. He just let him stride out a bit at the business end when Daddy Longnose closed. Therefore, hard to know what he had left. And my hunch, and this is really speculative, is it wasn't that much. Those hard early fractions may have taken its toll. A lot of people just assume he had an easy race here because he coasted home. I suspect he's had a harder race than you might think. Now, you shouldn't read too much into literal words Connections say afterwards. None of us express ourselves in precisely the correct words all the time. But Paul did say that Stateman was back more like himself. He didn't say back to himself. So very speculative. Vibes will be important on the run up to Cheltenham. Most people think it's inevitable he'll ride Stateman in the Champion Hurdle. But if he does think he wasn't quite in the same form as last season here and Lossiemouth works well at home, it's not impossible he jumped ship. And ironically, after a season where all the question marks have been about Constitution Hill, now looking increasingly like the question marks are all about his opposition.
Yeah, I can't wait for the race because we'll definitely get one of the mares more than likely Lossiemouth for sure. It just seems that way. I can't see the two of them taking each other on the mares. And who knows, bar days ahead, you never know. Stranger things. We could get an all-timer for the Champion Hurdle. Let's move on. Very briefly, man, I want to touch on the City Isles. Not the best trial for Cheltenham.
No.
Yeah.
It's long been quite a weak Grade 1, really. And that even went back to the period where we did have the Turner's Novice Chase over 2.5 miles, which you'd think would be the perfect race for this, but it hasn't been. The stats are runners are 4 from 77 at the festival, 65% loss, winners 2 from 20, 64% loss, and there were 1 from 24, 83% loss in the Turners. Only 4 runners, but a good spectacle. 2 horses giving their all. Looks like it's going to be more an Aintree guide this year than Cheltenham. Handstand's very likeable. Jumps, has a cruising speed, showed he stayed well when winning the Grade 2 Esher over 3 miles in December here. Wasn't that fluid 2 out, looked vulnerable between the last 2 fences, but really battled, may have just outstayed the runner-up. So Ben Pauling's obviously lost the jukebox man from the Broadway, but the Radfords aren't all about Cheltenham owners, so it seems to be no question of supplementing him. He's going for the mild May. Be interesting to see whether next season he's a Grade 1 horse in open company or a top range handicapper. He's got a new mark of 154. Django Bay was a bit keen to post, a bit keen in the race. He jumped 2 out better, looked to be coming to win the race between the last 2. Not quite as quick as the winner at the last, got done on the nod. Handstands isn't an out-and-out stayer, but he does get further, and he said he just looked to outstay him. Django Bay didn't shape like 3 miles is what he wants here. So 15.0 doesn't look a good bet for the Broadway. Connections have probably got a stronger candidate in Jinko Blue. The Manifesto at Aintree over 2.5 would look an ideal target for Django Bay. And finally, Caliph de Burley, this just a bit of a big ask at this stage of his career, having been run at 2 miles. He's also going to Aintree, and I'd expect Paul to back off him a bit now only 5. He's the classic Nichols horse who'll come on leaps and bounds probably in the next couple of seasons. So keep him in your tracker, but more for next season than this.
Okay, we will go towards eye catchers, Don, but feel free to have a line or two on the City Isles if need to. But and I know we've covered Marine National, so we can leave him off. You can touch briefly on Jasmine DeVoe too. But one horse that I backed, so therefore I was watching throughout the race and just thought, as it came to it, the couple of jumps cost them, particularly the last as well. Stormheart, I think that's definitely one to take.
Yeah, Marine National covered, Dan. Just think he'll come forward from this run. He's on an upward trajectory now for the season. His last run was better than his previous run, and vice versa. By the same token, this run was another step forward again. I think going back to Cheltenham, just think he's a largely kind of not forgotten, but kind of underrated horse in the champion hurdle picture this season. I think back at Cheltenham where he won the Supreme Novices hurdle with a fast pace and better ground, that'll all suit him. So I think he's one to keep in mind. Jasmine DeVoe, yeah, he finished 4th in the Daniel Hussey hurdle. He ran a kind of a funny race because he first of all he had cheek pieces on for the first time. He jumped way better than he did in his last 2 runs, and look, he had to his even when he won his maiden hurdle, his jumping wasn't good, and then it wasn't good at all in the Lawlers race. Like he was sent off as a warm-up favourite for the Lawlers and he didn't jump well enough. This time he was way better. He was kind of wide through much of the race. He was outpaced at the second last whenever they quickened, but he stayed on really well. He was second fastest through the final furlong after the winner, after final demand. And look, when he won that race at Navan, in which he didn't jump well, he beat the enabler, work ahead, and stat form at Leopardstown last time. So there's plenty to like about him. He's obviously a champion bumper winner, and with his jumping now getting better, and the cheek pieces seem to have brought a bit of improvement in him, I just think he could be a horse who could be interesting for the Albert Bartlett hurdle at a big price. And then Storm, yeah, McClory was a well-handicapped horse, obviously going into the race. He was potentially a well-handicapped horse, and he proved to be. Second winner of the weekend for Emmett Mullins, a third winner for Mark Walsh. But Stormheart, yeah, like he was a bit wide throughout as well. He was making a seasonal debut. He hadn't run since last May, and as we have alluded to on the show, the juvenile hurdlers from last season were a very, very good bunch. And he's one of them, and he was up there with the best of them. Like he ran the spring juvenile hurdle. He finished second behind Cargesi. He split Cargesi and Majbur in that. He finished 5th in the time hurdle. When he was sent off as favourite, he was a close-up 4th in the Punchestown 4-year-old race. So he was up there among the top echelons of the 4-year-olds. This was a really good run on his seasonal return. He didn't jump well at all. He just seemed to lose momentum and ground at most of his hurdles. And even at that, coming down to the final flight, if he jumped that better, he might have even won it. Now maybe McClean, but and he kind of was looking for stride. It wasn't there. He just had to allow him to go in and pop it again, which he seems to like to do. And even at that, he stayed on really strongly, and he only just went down by a length in the end to McClory. And in a good race, he should come on for this. He was rated 140 going into the race. He's now rated 147. To me, that's a mark that's more than workable for him. I think he's a classy horse. I think he's got the potential to be way better than 147, and maybe a step up on trip will help him, because he did seem to get outpaced over the second last, and maybe stepping up to 2.5 or thereabouts will suit him. So, maybe a Coral Cup, but he's definitely a horse to keep wherever he goes.
Jasmine DeVoe, Marine National, and Stormheart, the 3 eye catchers for Don, all from the Dublin Racing Festival. Your first one is from the Dublin Racing Festival, Matt, and Search for Glory.
Yes, he was 27 lengths, 10th in the 2R5 handicap chase. A stat for you, about DRF and handicaps. Produced 11 handicap winners at Cheltenham so far, 8 of which run in the handicaps at Leopardstown. Only one of those 8, Delta Work, who ran the 3-mile handicap hurdle before winning the Pretemps, ran at the same sort of trip at both meetings. Not rocket science to get your horse well handicapped by running over an unsuitable trip. Last year, I know the way you're thinking, 9th in this 2-mile-5 handicap chase for winning the Kim-Muir. The last year before that, Mascada was 11th for winning the Grand Annual. And Gordon said at the start of the season in his stable to in the Racing Post, Search for Glory looks an ideal type for the new 0-145 handicap version of the National Hunt Chase. On episode 2, I talked about him in terms of that race, explaining he'd been entered November at Cheltenham, got 145, didn't run. 2 good runs in defeat, Florida Pearl and Faheen, got him to 147 when entered in Britain the other day. So Gordon needs to get him down £2 27 lengths 10th here, showing up for a long way, so running a race and then fading might help. Quite possible the BHA handicapper will give him the please feel free to run in the Ultima, rating of 146. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Gordon run him again the next couple of weeks. He's not in the 10 up actually at the weekend, but get him dropped and get that 5th run in. Keep an eye on him, have him in your trackers, see what Gordon does. Second one is Bugsy Siegel, who was second in the Musselburgh Pertemps qualifier of 137. Smart novice last year, 4.5 lengths third to Handstands and Django By in the Sydney Banks, where he hated making the running. For 12 lengths third to Brighter Days Ahead in the Mersey. That form all looks pretty good now. Started over fences, didn't take to it. He's actually been an eye catcher both his starts over hurdles up to 3 miles this season. The first time 2.5 lengths third to Super Survivor at Doncaster. Winner went in again next time. And the horse that split them, Piffo, won this Pertemps qualifier, beating Bugsy Siegel by virtually the same amount, 2.5 lengths this time. Bugsy Siegel's been left on 137 based on his form from last spring, and that he looks to get 3 miles well. He looks open to plenty more improvement from that mark. There aren't typically too many such unexposed types in the Pertemps. This was just his 6th start over hurdles, 10th of his life. So 34.0 for the Pertemps final. He's one for the shortlist. And finally, Bambino Fever, indeed, won the Grade 2 Mares Bumper at DRF. Champion bumper picture's very murky. The winner of the Colts and Geldings bumper, Cole Cannon's not eligible after 6 bumper starts. And Willie Mullins has lacked bumper runners, let alone bumper stars this season. This is the first one from Clisutton that's jumped out at me. She bolted clear to beat the experienced switch from Diesel 7.5 lengths, 6 lengths back to the others. The third, Carrickmorna Spruce, had beaten Sortudo in the winner's bumper here at Christmas, switched from Diesel third. Sortudo was 1.5 lengths second to Cole Cannon the previous day. So the form looks pretty good. Bambino Fever's vying for favouritism in the champion bumper. Relegate did do this double in 2018. So depending on how the vibes are, she could be a lot shorter than 8.0 once the tapes go up. Don't know whether Patrick could do 11 stone, so jockey bookings will be interesting. And it does look an old-fashioned champion bumper without obvious stars. It could be a good race for momentum punters. Vibes about stellar work at home feed into the market in the last few days. So once the entries are out, rewatch all the races to see if you can find a horse with star quality that's been running in ordinary races so far. But at the moment, Bambino Fever looks as likely winner as any.
Okay, a long one this week, but thoroughly enjoyed reviewing the Dublin Racing Festival with both Matt and Donna. We'll be back next Tuesday to start our countdown to Cheltenham. We'll take on some individual races and stuff, but do check out our social channels and make sure you're subscribed or following wherever you're watching or listening. Enjoy the week's racing. Tom will be back with the racing team later in the week, but for now, take care and we'll chat to you next week.